Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. Okay, so I have my glass of orange juice because Mr. Blake is sick again, which means it's only a matter of time before I get sick again. Domesticity. So, we're going to basically jump in. I want to talk a little bit about the spell read. I will have posted, talking about time in a weird way again, I will have posted the discussion for this month's book yesterday. I do want to talk about it, but it relates a little bit to something that I want to talk about later, so we'll come back to it. We have one kind of relationship question and also a couple of personality quizzes that I missed from last week. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so these are the two that I missed last week. First one is Modern Romance, Things About You, and Marked, and they specifically mentioned their love of Theo. So these stories are very romantic. It's obviously in the title of one of them at least. Things About You is definitely, it's one of the most romantic stories that I have, and Marked is also deeply romantic. It is the closest thing to a true soulmate story that I have, people who are destined to be together. And then Modern Romance has a very, it has the kind of love that's it's like a passion kind of love. So to me, the underlying thread here is the, not desperation, not exactly passion, but that sort of drive to be together, which has a little bit of drama to it, a little bit of, for as real as Modern Romance is, there is a little bit of wish fulfillment to the way that the characters love each other. It's kind of that every time I focus in on their lives, it's like, here's this problem that they have that they either are acknowledging or they're not, and here's how it kind of works itself out at the end, or something happens, they choose themselves, they choose their partner, something gets resolved, and there might be something satisfying about that. There's probably something a little bit satisfying to the way that Things About You and Marked, those plots come together. So as much as this person has called out their love of Theo, and Theo is very interesting in all of these stories, he is definitely loyal to a fault, reckless to a fault, which are sort of easy qualities to admire in fiction. I would say, oh, sorry, that hurt. I bruised my knuckles, which I'm actually very excited about, she says, talking about not anything related at all. So I skinned my right knuckles and bruised my left knuckles from boxing, which makes me feel very dangerous. I've said before that I have this not regret. I always feel like, the ride or die Draco and Theo are like the most exciting ones. And I was like, I lament that I shall never have a motorcycle fight boy. But I'm becoming my own motorcycle fight boy, so manifesting my own desires. Anyway, what was I saying about Theo? So there's a lot to admire there, but I think I'm going to say you might be a person who's been disappointed by love before, or by an important relationship before, like a parental one. I know, I'm just out here making these calls. Either that, or maybe you're habitually disappointed by people, and so the idea of something falling into place is appealing to you. I mean, it's appealing to everyone, but specifically you. And sort of the out of your hands quality of it might be, that might be the part of the fantasy that you're drawn to. That this is, because these are the stories that have the least amount of choice. Like, yes, there is choice in modern romance, but because it's such a brief glimpse into their lives, we're not really focusing on the choice they're making so much as what is compelling them in the short term. So I'm actually going to guess that you're maybe not a very impulsive person, and maybe you do plan things out with deliberation. So having that taken out of your hands might be something that you long for, in a way. Ow, I did it again. Ow. They're really bruised. I'm dangerous and injured. There's a lot of darkness in these stories too. The ambiance of them is a little bit dark. There is quite a lot of desperation. I think that's why I'm pulling that out as the thing that I'm focusing on about your personality. And you are kind of looking for someone to not disappoint you, which might be what you like about Theo, because he never disappoints anyone, basically. He's like the most reliable person in any story always. So yeah. And then, okay, the second one, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Commoner's Guide to Bedding a Royal, Bachelorette, and Divination for Skeptics. These are actually all very similar stories. I mean, they're not, but also they are. They feature very similar concepts of Hermione being a person who's really not in it for a relationship. That's not what she's looking for at all. She's specifically not looking for a relationship with Draco. And it comes together, and also the Draco in these stories is very out of touch with his feelings. He is frequently in denial. A little bit less in Commoner's Guide, but still in Commoner's Guide, he's not really that able to express how he's feeling, for which, obviously, for different reasons in that story. He's characterized very differently in that story, so I kind of treat that story as slightly an outlier. I think that what there is to love about that story has a lot to do with how many lives are part of it and kind of the friend group and all that. So I'm focusing a little bit more on the actual relationships that are in the other stories. And they do involve very similar push and pull dynamics, which may just entertain you. That just may be something that you like. Maybe you like the banter. And as far as what that says about you, well, you're patient for one thing. You got through all those stories. I mean, there is a strong underlying current of, as someone recently called How to Win, absolutely bonkers. There is definitely a sense of absurdity to the premise of all of these stories. Like, something ridiculous is happening in every single one of them. And then I obviously have done my part, hopefully, to make them not feel absurd and to make them feel real. And so I think that there is that kind of multi-layer of, yes, I'm going into this totally kind of out there plot that's like a real stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to find what's buried there. I've said before that the number one thing that influences my work, or how my, like, not my writing style, but more like how I construct plots, is definitely fairy tales. All of my stories are one thing on the surface, and then a bunch of little things underneath that I'm like hoping you pick up, like a truffle pig or something. And I am going to say that you are probably one of the people who's finding the truffles. Otherwise, you wouldn't enjoy all of these stories, because all of these stories are like, yeah, you wouldn't have picked these four for your favorites if you were unable to see sort of the underlying, the thoughtfulness. You're probably a very thoughtful person. You clearly want to be entertained. These stories are, they have quite a lot of absurdity. Hortense and Thibaut are in two of these, so. And then Divination for Skeptics, you get Theo being peak Theo. Theo being peak Theo and Bachelorette also. So that's definitely something that appeals to you. I am going to say that you're the sort of person who can find value in a lot of things, probably mostly optimistic and upbeat, but not afraid to tackle things that are a little bit more difficult. Things that are, yeah, under the surface. You're looking for value in things. As entertaining as these stories may be, you are not reading to be entertained, you're reading to find something of value, and hopefully you did find them, because I do think that actually these stories do say quite a lot about love. They have a lot of takes about love. So yeah. Okay, so now we're moving into our relationship question. So, hey Olivie, one last relationship question for the year. I'm a big romantic, with a capital R, who has just begun to explore the world of dating in my mid-20s. I've always had a very clear idea of what a relationship would entail, and consequently I think the standards in my head are quite high. This is not helped by my voracious reading. Now I expect a Plato-quoting motorcyclist. I told you! So, you just have to become your own motorcycle fight boy. The bruises are fine. So my fear is that all these grand ideas in my head will prevent me from recognizing the right person. What if he isn't tall or financially well off? Am I shallow for even having these prerequisites? I want to get swept off my feet, as you've mentioned in a few previous videos, but I'm worried that all these preconceived notions will stop me from seeing that that person has arrived to do the sweeping. Please help. Okay, I've got a lot of things to say. The first and most important thing is you're in your mid-20s, which means that whether you're registering this or not, you may be starting to feel like you're falling behind, because this is when a lot of people you're going to start seeing wedding pictures when you're scrolling through your Instagram, and you're going to start hearing about people getting married. Your friends are suddenly going to have different last names. And whether or not you're consciously having any feelings about this, it is probably registering in the back of your mind. I read this article once about how it's not really that women's hormones make them suddenly want children when it's later in life. It's more that they're having this sort of existential sense of, I should be on some path and I don't know if and it works out to the question of, do I want a baby or do I want to have kids, is actually a very small piece of what they're really going through. So that's a little bit later than your mid-20s. But definitely this is when you're going to start having extremely irrational fears, because whether you acknowledge it or not, you on some level are starting to feel like you're behind other people, or you're going to start to feel anxiety that you shouldn't feel. All the time I have said that these timelines are arbitrary. I don't know why people get married in their mid-20s. I don't know if it's something about boys like finally maturing enough that they can like conceptually handle a committed relationship. As problematic as some parts of Sex and the City are, there are definitely some things that still hold true. And one of them is that boys are like taxis. You can ride, if their lights are off, you can ride around in them forever and they are not going to commit. It doesn't matter who is in the car. It matters if the lights have turned on. Like if they're ready for a relationship, whoever's in the car is who they marry. And I don't know how true that actually is, but it definitely does feel true. And that can be one of the pitfalls of dating, is that it often feels like these boys, their taxi lights are not on. They're not actually in service. They're not here to contemplate their future. And whether that's a maturity thing or just a life thing or a personal thing, unknown. But the point is that this is when you're going to start to become conscious or subconscious of the fact that people around you are coupling off and getting together and you're dating, and that might make you feel like something's wrong with you, you're missing something. But all of that is just arbitrary. You have a long life. There's no reason. I mean, if you think about the fact that, so when you're in your mid-20s, you want to be with someone who's around your age, right? Because it's weird if they're too much older, and it's if they're younger, they're basically useless. I don't know if you've met boys in their early 20s. You don't want that. If you think about things being, okay. So if you think about the fact that you're going to meet this person that you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with, when you're both in your mid-20s, who even are you in your mid-20s? It's really unlikely that you are both going to be this, like, at a point where this is a good time to, like, be together. I don't know how to explain this. It's just that life is long, you know? And it feels like it's short, and it feels like it's rushing, and it feels like you're not matching up to the timelines around you. But that's really not how things work. Yes, some people meet the people that they marry at this age, but also, yes, some people meet the people that they're going to divorce in a few years at this age. So you have to just recognize that people getting married around you or being together around you does not mean you're behind. You're not on their race. So this is an anxiety that you're having. It is mostly irrational. It's you having a sort of series of mini inner existential crises that is manifesting in this irrational fear. And I can assure you this is irrational because you're not going to, like, love is not just a train that you miss. You know, it's not like the train shows up and this is the one, and then you miss the train is gone, and you'll never love again. That's not how love works. I know that there are a lot of, most fiction will lead you to believe otherwise, but I assure you that's not the case. You shouldn't be afraid that you're not going to find a fulfilling relationship, because it will happen. It may happen multiple times, and there's nothing wrong with that. As far as it goes with love not being a train you can miss, I knew I felt something different about Mr. Blake when I met him. It was very instant. He was nothing that I was looking for at all. He was essentially, he was basically my personal trainer. He was doing a fitness assessment for me when I was in law school. I was fully intent on marrying, another lawyer or someone who was at the business school or whatever. I mean, the law school is next to the business school and the medical school. And then I show up for my fitness assessment at the gym, and the guy who's there is just unbelievably hot, and there's more to it than that, but that's also very important. I was at a point in my life where I had never dated anyone longer than 30 days. I did not like relationships. They made me feel very stifled. I don't trust other people very easily. It's very difficult for me to be vulnerable with people. So I never really expect things to go anywhere. And a weekend, Mr. Blake calls me his girlfriend. And I panic. And I go home to my roommates. I lived with two boys at the time, boys I knew from college. And one of them happened to be home and was like, let's get lunch. So we went, and I remember we had tacos, and they were not very good tacos because I lived in Chicago and tacos are not good in Chicago. That's not the point. So we went for tacos, and he asked me how things were going with Mr. Blake. And I said, I don't know. I think he might be moving too fast. Like, I think it might be too serious. And my friend said, well, do you like him? And I said, yes. And he said, does he make you feel good? And I said, yes. And he was like, is there anything actually wrong? And I was like, no. He's like, okay, so if you're happy, if he makes you happy, then wherever it goes is wherever it goes. And it was this very kind of, this moment of putting things in perspective of just like, why am I worrying about this? These aren't real things. It was just the period in my life. It was the way that I thought things were supposed to go. Everything had kind of taken me off guard. But the point is, I married Mr. Blake, you know, you don't actually, these preconceived notions don't matter in the end. When it's actually the right person, all of this is irrelevant garbage. You're not even going to think about what those preconceived notions were. So I just read an article that was called, I Met My Husband When I Was 22 and Wild. How did I manage to make the right decision? And that is exactly the place that I was. This article, I could have ghostwritten this article. It's exactly how I felt at the time when I met Mr. Blake. It's exactly how I feel now about him. But she felt what she calls an insistent desire to be near him. And that is exactly what I felt as well. And I think that is what you feel when it happens. And it has absolutely nothing to do with their height or what you want out of the relationship or where the relationship is going. It's just this feeling like I would rather be near him than not, or her, or whatever it is. These things that you think you want are not actually going to register when you're around this person. I read once that love, and I think we all sort of agree that love at first, or the initial attraction, is just some sort of weird chemical or hormonal reaction that's kind of like a survival mechanism. Like, you can kind of imagine that maybe, you know, humans paired off because it was easier to survive in the world with two people rather than one. And then from there, it's become this like social practice of having two people. But it really all is built on that initial feeling of, I want to be near you. And that is a very, very simple thing. And it doesn't matter what anxieties you have going into it. It does not matter what you think you want. It really does not matter what you expect to have. In my experience, and in my experience with other people who have relationships where they feel similarly to me, it's someone you don't expect. It's someone who wasn't at all what you were looking for, who doesn't fit the trend of your past relationships. It's bizarre, and it's totally bonkers. I don't know why it happens. I know I like to think that it sticks because you make choices to make it work and make it stick. But that initial feeling of actually being swept off your feet has nothing to do with his height. But I did want to bring up, I went to a party recently. I was talking to these girls that I had never met. And one of them was on Hinge. The other is married. And the one who was on Hinge was pretty tall. She was much taller than me, and I was wearing heels. And she was rejecting anyone under 6 foot. And her friend was like grabbing for her phone, being like, oh my God, like, don't do that. Like, you never know. Like, what if one of these 5'10", 5'11" guys is your soulmate? And the thing that really struck me is what the girl said, which was, but you'll never get married this way. I was about to say, who cares? When the other girl, this registered with her, and she's like, okay, fine, okay. And the thing that I thought was so interesting, and especially with City of Girls, is kind of, it's back to that old Catherine Ryan idea of men are taught to become somebody, women are taught to find somebody. And I think that I want to make 2 points here. For me, the idea, obviously I am married, so this is very easy for me to say, But the idea of marriage being a goal is a lot of stress. So that was one thing I wanted to both remark to you in terms of advice. I think that you shouldn't so much think about trying to find the one so much as finding someone you want to be near. And then in terms of this book, we know this book is about a woman who has sex basically for her personal enjoyment of it. She's never looking for a husband, nor does she find one. She builds a sort of community of women around her, her chosen family, and she is basically pretty satisfied with that. And it was nice to read a story like that, where she wasn't feeling any sort of loss about not having a traditional partner. So that was just very interesting, and I just kind of wanted to question, why we feel this immense pressure to match up with someone, and it's a little bit, it can be a little bit frustrating, because how many women have you seen, and actually this girl, the girl who was married, who was desperate for her friend to get married, was just like way better than her husband. And how often do you see that? It happens all the time, and it's because women feel this terrible need to find someone, or they won't be validated by themselves, their family, society. And I think that builds up this fear, this anxiety that you're having, that you can somehow miss the person that you're going to love or that you can love. I don't really think that's a thing that you should worry about. Certainly not a thing you should worry about. And I think that it would be best if you sort of alter your lens. I kind of recommend you read this book if you haven't already, just to kind of see what life is like when it doesn't fit into this bluster of wedding dresses in your mid-20s. I don't know whether you find that encouraging or discouraging or whatever. I think I just want to tell you primarily this is an anxiety, and therefore nothing can technically soothe it, but maybe it would help you if you could acknowledge the context of what you're feeling, which is just that things are changing around you. And you're worried about doing things wrong and not getting what you want because of a mistake that you made. But that's just not really how life works. I don't think that I deserved Mr. Blake when I met him. I don't think I was ready for him in any way. I certainly was not looking for him. I was not looking for any single part of what he was. And that was a delightful surprise, that he is the man that he is. This author says in her article that, she's like, I don't know how I managed to make the right decision. I don't know how I managed to know that this was the right choice to make. All I knew was that there was a beautiful and good man, and I picked him. And that's how I feel about it too. And I know that doesn't soothe anything for you, but I think believing in the idea that you'll know, you shouldn't let go of that. Trust your gut. Feminine intuition is a very powerful thing. I like to think we're all a little bit witches. So anyway, this is the last video for 2019. I don't know, I just wanted to say that this was a very hard year. This was a really, really difficult year on a lot of different levels. For me, it was a personal, professional, difficult year. I know that a lot of people had pretty intense breakups this year. There's just a lot of change happening, and it can be uncomfortable. It's a little bit of pins and needles, which is why I'm excited for this next year. Hope is a dangerous thing to feel, I think, sometimes, but I am excited about going into another year with you, starting fresh as I do the same thing. But I'm very, very grateful to you guys for being here, for being, not just an audience, but a community. And I don't want to get corny, so I'll cut myself off, but I'm really grateful for you. I hope that you have a wonderful holiday and an optimistic new year. I'm looking forward to starting again with you. I'll see you probably the second or third week in January. So, until then, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next year.